Novel Navigator. Chapter 101, Z Package. Adam followed behind Kong. They entered the store's back room, and there, Kong flicked a hidden switch that opened up a secret passageway that headed down into the basement. Through the spiraling staircase, they arrived at the dark basement with a lonely light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It had a singular rope hanging from it. Kong tugged on it, and a dim light stretched across the basement. Adam looked past the hanging light bulb and saw that there was another door at the end wall of the basement. It looked like it was part of the same stone wall as the rest of the basement. However, there was a door handle on it, and its edges stuck out slightly from the rest of the wall. "This is the center of our operations," Kong said and pushed open the door. A sight opened to a very large underground room filled with monitors and computers. In the seats, there were several people typing furiously on keyboards. On the monitors, there were maps and live footage of various locations around the city. Kong took a seat on a big meeting table, then pointed at the chair on the opposite side of the table. Adam sat down on the chair Kong had pointed at. "Sir," a man said from the monitor side. "There are some people lurking about outside." "Is that so?" Kong raised an eyebrow and then looked at Adam, believing he had something to do with that. "Yet." The man looked at Adam. "They seem to have been following him." "They've been following me from Dust King's bar," Adam answered truthfully. "From Dust King's bar?" Kong chuckled. "That's at the center. I wonder why they didn't make their move sooner." "Who knows?" Adam shrugged his shoulders. "Let's go straight to the business," Kong said and interlocked his fingers. "How did you find out about my business?" "The word spreads around," Adam said. "One of your clients couldn't keep their lips shut tight." Yeah, that can happen," Kong said, but then chuckled. "I let your lie slip because I don't really care." "I am not that bad of a liar, or am I?" Adam asked with a smile. "Not necessarily, but what you said didn't make any sense," Kong said. "I only offer my services to a special group of people. I don't just help any common thug with loose lips." "That's true." Adam put his baseball cap down on the table and leaned back in his chair. "I guess I was too careless with my lie." "That's fine. Let's talk business," Kong said. "Z package, was it?" "Correct." Adam rummaged through his backpack and put several stacks of money rolls on the table. 50,000. Kong waved his hand, and a worker of his came and took the money and put a blueprint on the table. "I am not sure whether you'll know the full extent of the Z package, but I'll explain anyway. It includes house reinforcement, trap installments, and a secret hideout. It will make the house a miniature fortress, impervious to any threats. I want to be the only one with access," Adam said. "Connect the access to my virtual reality pod as well. I can't always be in the real world to access it." "Of course, we have done this for other mercenaries before," Kong said. "I bought the same in my past life, but in the end, it failed as that other world killer still managed to bypass the security measures. I can only think of one reason why that other world killer knew where I lived and knew all about Z package's security measures, because that person also had it. Or someone did research about my living place and found out that I had Z package installed in my house. Either way, my death was well planned out. I just wish I would have found out who the fuck was he. Either way, Z package failed me back then, but it is still the best thing that money can buy. It can protect me and my family from any outside threats." "Do you have any questions?" Kong asked. "How confident are you in your work?" Adam asked. "If there are any weaknesses in the security, I need to know." Kong silently tapped his finger on the table and then looked at the monitors that showed the entirety of the red thread. "My family built this place," he said. "Red thread, it was all my family's doing. Ivy Crest was built for one reason, to create red thread. It was the creation of my family's brightest minds, and it was done 200 years ago, when technology was nothing like it is these days. Am I confident in my work? I am. I heard stuff that one owner of Z Package was killed in their home. Adam said. That's just a rumor, don't believe everything you hear, but if that happened, how could it have? I haven't heard of anything like that happening. Kong said with a frown. But it is disturbing to think about. I am still purchasing this product. I just want to know about any possible leaks. There's one, Kong said. Adam leaned closer with interest. The machine that oversees the house is programmed to be able to identify threats and friendly. A person identified as friendly can bypass the security measures and enter the house without any issues. Interesting. Adam thought out loud with a frown. Is it done manually or? It can be done manually. Kong said. Like, if you live with your family, we can program them to be friendly, and then they can enter without any issues. What is that person who never did that? Adam asked with a frown. The machine is also able to think by itself. Kong said. Like, if you are guests, the machine can identify them as friendly based on how they and you act. Otherwise, if you hadn't put them as friendly beforehand, the security measures will activate and fill your guests with holes from head to toe. We can't let that happen now, can we? So, the person, in theory, was killed by a guest of his. Adam asked. How did the murder happen? Kong asked. Apparently, the person woke up one day, there was a masked individual already there, and after an altercation, the masked individual ended up killing the person. I can only think of one way. Kong raised a single finger. That masked person once visited the person as a friend. Therefore, the machine identified them as friends based on how they acted with each other. And when the masked person returned to kill him, the machine didn't activate the security measures because he was already registered as friendly. I see. Adam said out loud with an enlightened expression. That narrows it down. I was only visited by a couple of people. Sapphira, Fleur, Dean, Perseus, and Kiernan. One of them is my killer. It hurt him badly. They were one of his closest companions. They fought side by side for years, bled together, and trusted each other with their lives. It's hard to remember. Adam touched his head. Everything is so fuzzy. I remember that the attacker sounded male, but there are convincing voice changers, and based on its body type, it also seemed like a male, but that can also be faked. Are you all right? Kong asked. Yeah. Adam wrote something on the paper and gave it to Kong. This is the address. Can you start as soon as tomorrow? That can be arranged. Kong said and then looked at the monitors. However, if you happen to die, we won't do it since you can't finish the payment. I understand. Adam stood up and slung the backpack over his shoulder, then put the cap back on. We won't be helping you with them. Kong said. It would be rather disappointing for a S-ranker such as yourself to die in the hands of such common thugs. I'll take care of myself, thank you. Adam nodded and headed to the exit. You have confidence in yourself. Kong stood up slowly and said, however, the world is a dangerous place, and you stepped into the heart of that danger. Be careful out there. Adam nodded and left the basement. Kong walked over to the monitors and smiled. Will he be able to get away? Chapter 102, Statement. Adam left the store through the front door, a backpack on his shoulder and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. The cameras stationed around the store followed him with intense scrutiny, capturing his every move. Hey, you! At that moment, several people left the shadow of the nearby alleyway and surrounded him like a pack of wolves. They were quite tall, towering over Adam like a bunch of giants. They knew they were quite menacing looking, and any ordinary person would be shitting bricks at the sight of them. They took pride in that and even displayed their tattoos proudly for all to see. "You know what I smell when I look at you?" one of them asked with a grin. "A smell of a coward. Brat, you came to the wrong place," another one said and cracked his knuckles. "There are some sick individuals lurking around here, and you would sell for a penny. So that's why you are here?" Adam asked emotionlessly. "To sell me as a slave? You catch up quick." They laughed. "That's right. It's nothing personal, just business. Occasionally, some people from above the ground venture here or get lured in. They'll never see another light of the sun again. The slave industry is a booming business down here. We make a pretty penny off of it." "You seem like you're someone new here," a man said. "If you just decide to give up willingly, we promise we won't sell you to some sick monster who will do unspeakable things to you." Adam scratched his forehead and shook his head. He then slowly dropped his backpack and pulled out 2 shiny bladed knives. Their expressions changed to annoyance. "Idiot!" a man said and revealed a gun holster with a pistol slipped inside. He touched the handle and stared at Adam with a steely gaze. "This is the real world, brat. Wanna rather die? Fuck off." Adam swung his knife and sliced through the throat of a person beside him. The person looked shocked and fell to the ground while blood poured out of his throat. He didn't expect to get attacked. Everyone thought that Adam would put his focus on the gunman in front of him, but everyone was wrong. "Fucker." The man unholstered the pistol, but before he could raise it to fire at him, Adam sliced his fingers off with the red-handled knife, and the man dropped the weapon in agony. "Arg!" The rest looked shocked for a moment, but then they brought out their sharp-bladed pocket knives and rushed at the young man. They came from all directions, but then Adam swung his knives around, deflecting and leaving behind trails of blood as he fought off the attackers. Adam weaved around the attackers, slicing, stabbing, and parrying their attacks with masterful skill. His arms moved like whips, and with each slice, his speed increased, making it impossible for the attackers to keep up. One of the attackers stabbed with his pocket knife, but then Adam moved his knife, slashed the attacker's fingers off, and then finished him off with a quick stab to the chest. Another person fell to the ground with a loud scream. However, he didn't die, but he was severely injured and unable to continue the fight. "Just fucking kill him!" The leader of the group, who had the gun, screamed in pain while holding his fingerless hand. Adam brought down his knives and blocked a machete, with the 2 blades scratching against the blade of the machete. At that moment, a pocket knife came behind him. Adam swung his right arm over his shoulder and blocked the pocket knife with his knife. The blade of the pocket knife hit the blade of his knife and clanged loudly, causing a spark to fly in the dimly lit street. How the hell did he block that?" the person whispered to himself. "Does he have eyes at the back of his head or what?" Adam whipped his leg across the person's waist and sent him sprawling to the ground with a loud thud. The machete-wielding man screamed and raised it high above his head, but it left his chest wide open, and Adam quickly sliced through his abdomen with the sharp knife. The man collapsed on the ground while trying to stop himself from bleeding. Adam looked around at the group of men, sprawling and crying on the ground with various injuries. Without proper medical care, most of them would die. "Arg!" The leader of the group grabbed the gun with his last remaining hand and aimed it straight at Adam. Before he could pull the trigger, Adam kicked the gun out of his hand and stabbed his knife through his shoulder. Fuck! The man screamed in agony and looked at him hatefully. "Why you'll regret this?" Adam pulled his knife out of the bleeding shoulder and wiped it on the man's shirt before saying, "I highly doubt that. Why you think you can get away with this? You won't." The man said, "You intentionally did shallow wounds because you're afraid to kill. You can't survive here if you aren't willing to kill." Adam raised an eyebrow, and without a change of expression, he slashed through the man's throat. This time, it was a much deeper wound. The man, shocked and utterly baffled, fell to the ground and felt his life slowly drain away from him. In the last moments of his life, he watched as Adam stood up and wiped the blood off the knives as if it were just another day. Who they are. His words became incomprehensible as he took his final breath. Adam put away his knives and looked straight at the cameras that recorded it all. Kong and others watched silently as Adam finished off the fight and then turned to look at the camera as if he were making a statement. Ha, I see. Kong chuckled and shook his head. Statement, hey. He is not even that old yet, and he is willing to kill without a second thought. Someone said. Does he feel nothing? There are people who have lost the ability to tell the difference between the fake and real worlds. To them, killing is just the same in both worlds. Kong scratched his beard and said, however, it has only been barely a month since he started playing the game. Has he really been affected that much already? Maybe he has been raised by a criminal family. A person asked. He has top-level skill. No wonder he became S-ranker with that amount of skill, and he can kill without blinking. Maybe. Kong looked at the address on the piece of paper. Navy Town, his home is in just some rural area. Also, I don't recognize Palestar name. What was the statement you talked about, Sir Kong? The news move around red thread quickly. Kong said. Within a day, all the big names of the city will know that the newly crowned S-ranker, Adam Palestar, visited this place and they will know his every move. Him defeating those guys was him making a statement in the real world, he is not someone to be messed with. I see. The person muttered. What crazy confidence he has. Are all S-rankers like this? Not sure, this is my first time meeting one. Kong chuckled. What a crazy group of people. S-rankers. So, we'll be expecting visitors from the gangs tomorrow. Kong looked at one of them and asked. You have the recording of the fight, right? That's right. Make copies out of them. Kong said. We'll give it to them, otherwise, they'll just bother us all day long. All right, sir. Also, let's start the transport of our equipment to Navy Town. Kong said with a smile. We have a new client, we can't disappoint him. Chapter 103, Silent. After leaving the dark corners of the red thread, Adam arrived back at the city's more bustling streets. The death matches had finished, and the streets looked alive with vendors selling their goods and people going about their daily lives. Carriages, pulled by rugged-looking humans, rolled down the cobblestone streets, carrying both passengers and goods to and from various destinations. A slight disturbance suddenly happened in the crowd, and a bronze-skinned kid with curly hair ran away from the commotion, clutching a small leather pouch tightly in his hand. He was immediately followed by a group of angry-looking men who had already had their knives pulled out. The commotion lasted for a second, and after they had already run further away, the crowd's interest faded away, and they returned to their conversations and activities. Selling goods from the Deadlands. A vendor shouted while waving a rusty sword in the air. The original place of the Dark Plague, come buy priceless artifacts. Come purchase foods imported from the most dangerous regions in the world. The vendors engaged in shouting matches, trying to attract the crowd with their unique and dangerous wares. Adam moved into the crowd, unnoticed and silent like a shadow in the night. As he moved by, he noticed a group of people walk between two buildings and then down dark stairs. They disappeared as soon as they appeared. They all wore strange clothes. One had a coat made entirely of feathers, another had a hat shaped like a fish, and the last one was carrying a glowing lantern with a blue flame. That place. Adam scratched his chin. I don't have a lot of money left, but I'm so curious about what they're offering there. However, before following the group of people, he headed back to the vendors and looked around with a keen eye. Soon, he found the vendor he was looking for. There were all sorts of cloth pieces on display, but Adam was searching for a specific color and pattern that matched the outfit he had in mind. His eyes landed on a sleek, black suit with a high collar, silver-colored buttons, and a full face mask that revealed nothing. It was accompanied by a long, flowing cloak made of a special, noise-dampening fabric that draped over the shoulders of the suit and reached all the way down to the ankles. It had an inner lining of deep, midnight blue with silver thread forming constellations and arcane symbols. To top it all off, it fastened at the front with a clasp shaped like an ancient arcane symbol. The mask was a matching silver color with intricate engravings of stars and moons. It would make the wearer feel mysterious and ancient. "How much is this?" Adam asked the vendor. The vendor rubbed his lengthy beard and scanned the young man closely. He was trying to gauge just how easy it would be to extend the price. "It's a specially tailored outfit. From what I heard, it once belonged to the creator of Kalaman. It's a magic cult, if you haven't heard. The mask is accompanied by a voice-changing feature that can mimic any voice, and the fabric of the cloak and suit can block out knife attacks." "So, how much?" Adam asked. 5,000. The vendor said. "I only sell preem stuff. If you only sold preem stuff, you wouldn't be begging for customers on the street corner." Adam quipped. "If I had to guess, the voice-changing feature must not be working properly either, and that's why it is currently in your possession." "NGH." The vendor scoffed and crossed his arms. "If you don't want it, piss off. I will buy it for 1,000 electros." 1,000. The vendor laughed mockingly. "As if. This fabric alone is worth 2,000, at most, and not to mention that it belonged to the creator of one of the most infamous cults." Adam pulled out his red-handled knife and stabbed it through the fabric. It went cleanly through, leaving a small hole. "Ah!" the vendor cried out. "What the hell was that for?" "That material is Rukara," Adam said. "It's strong, but like humans, it's one of the materials that also ages and, with age, becomes weaker. It's stronger than ordinary fabric, sure, but it definitely can't stop knife attacks anymore." "Cursed!" the vendor cried out and pinched his glabella. "Fine, 1,000 it is." Adam slammed the 1,000 money rolls on the table, then took the outfit and walked away. With quick steps, he left the crowd-filled area and entered the same alley where the strange group went. There, he put the suit and cloak on, then adjusted the mask on his face. It happened to be a good match, except slightly tight around the eyes. Adam took out his 2 knives from the backpack, strapped them around his belt, and hid them underneath the cloak. He then dropped his backpack in a nearby garbage bin, hid it there, and then started walking down the same stairs as the other group. The stairs were made out of rocks, with a narrow pathway that led even deeper to the underground. It was around 50 steps, and once Adam arrived at the bottom, he saw a narrow passageway that was dimly lit by lanterns on either side. The passageway was tightly squeezed between 2 walls, barely wide enough for one person to walk through at a time. At the end, there was a black door shrouded in shadows and connected to a tall building. The building had nearly 10 floors. It had clearly other entrances beside this one, but this was clearly used for a more secret purpose. Adam approached the door, took a deep breath, and then did a secret knocking pattern that only those on the inside would recognize. "I hope it is the same as in the future." He waited in silence, and soon, strange mechanications around the door opened one by one. Until the door finally creaked open. "Who?" Half of the face appeared from the other side. "Goes there?" The timid voice belonged to a gold-haired woman with long eyelashes and dim gold eyes. Her lips were painted a deep shade of gold, trembling slightly as she spoke. "My name's Silent," Adam said, deepening his voice behind the mask, which sounded natural. "I am sorry, am I late? I don't recognize you," the beautiful woman said as she furrowed her brow in confusion. "I am new," Adam said. "I was given instructions, though. I was told to wear a disguise, then that knocking rhythm and the starting date." "MMH." The woman slowly opened the door. She also had a strange outfit. On the other half of her face was covered by a golden mask with the eye closed shut as if it were winking, and she was dressed in a glorious golden dress that left little to the imagination with its plunging neckline and high slit. "My name's Goldie, welcome." She introduced herself and left the door open enough for him to walk through. Adam nodded to her and stepped through the entrance. A view opened up to him, with close to a dozen figures seated around the large round table. They all had strange outfits. There were also the ones with the coat made out of leather, a person with the hat of a fish, and the lantern-carrying man. "Take a seat," Goldie said timidly and pointed at the last remaining chair. "My master will be here shortly. I guess I'll act out as Silent, my last life's secret identity." Adam took a deep breath and changed his entire demeanor to fit his alternate identity Silent. Silent straightened his back and then took a seat around the table. Everyone's attention was on him from the start. Chapter 104, The Secret Meeting. The cuckoo clock on the wall continued ticking down. "It's been an hour, where is he?" Silent thought to himself, but outside, it looked like he was just sitting still, waiting for something to happen. No one else around the table spoke a word. However, some of them seemed impatient and wanted to go either for a quick smoke break or a bathroom break. Goldie, standing on the sides obediently, checked her timepiece and realized that they had already been waiting for over an hour. "Master, where are you?" "Zzz." Suddenly, a static noise came from inside a wall. At least it seemed like it was coming from inside a wall. "Goldie, come to my office." The voice was rough-sounding, with a slight tremor in the tone. It was like the person had been shouting for over an hour to cause the voice to turn like that. "Excuse me." Goldie bowed and then headed upstairs as fast as she could with her heels clicking on the marble steps. She soon found her way to the office, just a few doors down from the stairs, and then opened the door before entering. It was a dark room, with the only light coming from the several monitors mounted on the walls. A man, with his face hidden behind a sunflower mask, sat on a chair that was seemingly a gaming chair based on its design. He was staring at the leftmost monitor that showed a person with a black mask of stars and moons. "Master Sunflower." Goldie courtly greeted him. "Who is he?" Sunflower pointed at the person on the screen. "He said that his name is Silent." Goldie said. "Is something wrong?" "He hasn't been here before," Sunflower said with a suspicious tone. "I don't like that a stranger came here unknowingly." He knew the knocking pattern, knew about having a secret identity, and even knew the table ruler's no talking before the meeting. "Someone told him all that," Sunflower said and looked at his beautiful assistant. "What do you think? You have always had a good eye for people's intentions." It's not that good," she stuttered shyly. "I didn't find any malice from him, but this eye of mine is not a superpower, and I can always be mistaken." "That's enough, I guess." Sunflower stood up and tightened the clasp on his mask. "Let's get the meeting started. Keep an eye on this Silent." "Yes, Master." The lights on the ceiling of the red thread dimmed down as if it were turning into a night. A darkness swept over the red thread, but the windows of various buildings were still brightly lit, casting light upon the streets. The city became even more active after the lights turned off. The bars were filled with laughter and music, spilling out onto the sidewalks, and the red light district began to come alive with bustling activity. The hidden building, tucked away in the safety of the underground, turned very dark. People around the meeting table stayed silent while the darkness swept over them. They couldn't see each other. At that moment, a pair of footsteps came from the marble steps. Click, click. A man with a sunflower came to the room, using his lighter to light up the path. The lighter's fire was weak, but it was enough. He took out a candle from a shelf, lit it with the flame, and then placed the candle at the center of the table. A deep, yellow light flickered in the room, casting shadows of around dozen figures on the walls. "Welcome everyone." Sunflower got seated, and Goldie sat right beside him. The figures nodded simultaneously. We have a new member, it seems. Sunflower looked straight at Silent. Mind telling us your name? Silent. Buying or selling? Sunflower asked. Only buying, Silent replied. NN. Sunflower nodded and then turned to a woman with heart-shaped glasses and a mask that only covered her nose, mouth, part of her cheeks, and the chin. Heart, buying, or selling? Selling. Heart said with a very pleasant voice. Then, you may begin. Sunflower said and laid back on his chair. Heart stood up while she made sure that her dress was not wrinkled. A while back, I got an item in my possession. Heart said with a gentle chuckle. It is a magician's cane. It has a fire orb added to it, which gives 200% extra power with every fire-based attack. Any offers? Sunflower asked. At that moment, a man with a mask of 3 different faces raised a skinny hand. 3 face. Sunflower nodded. How much? 3 face asked with a low voice. Definitely someone from the Deadlands. Silent added inside his mind. Everyone from there. Sounds like they're half dead. 300,000. Heart said with a smile. I'll take it. 3 face said with a low grunt. Yay! Heart clapped her hands and sat back down. Finish the transaction after the meeting. Sunflower said and turned to a person with a coat made of feathers. Birdman, buying or selling? Selling, Birdman replied. Silent silently watched. There are all sorts of groups that sell their in-game items for real-life money, but this is the only place to find the really rare stuff. I doubt I can afford anything, but I might as well make myself known to them. I might visit this place later, after I have increased my money reserves. Birdman stood up and said, I am selling a painting. No offense, Bird Brain, but I doubt anyone here is interested in a goddamn painting. A man who was sitting very disrespectfully with his legs on the table said. He had a mask of sorrowful-looking eyes that made him look like he was perpetually mourning his own death. Penitence, silence. Sunflower sharply replied and turned to Birdman. May you explain its functions? Birdman cleared his throat and began explaining the painting. When the person dies, their consciousness returns to their real body while their virtual avatar slowly vanishes and joins the matrix of the digital afterlife. However, this painting can trap the virtual avatar within itself, preventing it from disappearing. The painting becomes the avatar's eternal prison. How much? A woman with a smiley mask asked. 100,000, Birdman replied. I'll take it. Smiley replied and nodded to Sunflower. All right, Smiley, Birdman, finish the transaction after the meeting. Thank you. The meeting continued through the night until the early hours of midnight. Most of the attendees had already either bought or sold some of their items. However, all of them noticed that one person had stayed quiet through it all. Silent. He truly lives up to his name. Goldie thought to herself while throwing glances in his direction. I can't really tell his intentions. What an unfathomable person. That was the last transaction of today. Sunflower stood up and said, You may now finish the transactions. Once done, you're free to leave. The next meeting is next month, in the same place. Silent immediately stood up and headed straight to the door. Wait for a moment. Sunflower followed after him with a few quick steps. You're in a hurry to leave. Is something wrong? I am tired. Silent replied shortly and put his hand on the doorknob, ready to twist it. You didn't buy anything. Sunflower said. Not impressed with anything. I couldn't afford anything. Sunflower blinked behind the mask in surprise. He didn't expect such an honest answer. Ha! Sunflower chuckled behind the mask and waved his hand. I am sorry, but that came out of nowhere. That's fine. Silent replied without much emotional fluctuation in his tone and slowly opened the door to leave. Sunflower watched Silent leave, and after the door closed behind him, he put his hidden knife back into its sheath. If he didn't like Silent's answer, he would have simply killed him. What a strange person! Sunflower thought with a frown. Chapter 105, Girl Talk. The following morning, the sun shone brightly over a beautiful land filled with beaches and palm trees. On the beach, lying on a colorful towel, Alice enjoyed the sun on her fair skin while wearing a blue bikini with white polka dots. She had sunglasses on, looking straight at the blue sky with clouds scattered across it. In her ears, the calm sound of waves could be heard in the background. Mom! Alice turned her head sideways and saw her mother, Sarah, lying on a beach chair with a book in her hand. Yes, Alice. Sarah said absent-mindedly while flipping through another page of her book. Alice sat back up and hugged her legs. I have an odd feeling. Was it really wise to leave Adam alone? He is an adult now. Sarah said, licked her finger, and turned another page, not giving Alice's concern much thought. But weren't there some shady figures lurking around the neighborhood earlier this week? Alice asked in concern. What if they try to rob our house? Adam is alone there, and what if he is currently playing? She shuddered at that thought. The virtual pod was worth quite a bit, and if they just pulled Adam off the game without a second thought, it could destroy his brain. She couldn't bear the idea of losing him in such a horrific way. Her beautiful face paled at such thoughts. You're overthinking it, Sarah said with a chuckle. I'll call for him, just in case. Alice brought out her phone and quickly dialed his number. Sarah rolled her eyes and shook her head. She didn't think there was much to worry about, but when she thought about it further, she agreed that there was some validity in Alice's concern. Ah, he is fine, just a foolish thought. Sarah thought with a chuckle, but she couldn't focus on the book anymore as it was quite a worrying thought. The phone rang for a moment, but no one answered. He isn't answering. Alice cried out. Calm down. Sarah said, took her phone and closed it. When has Adam ever answered any phone calls? He's probably just playing, like you expected. Alice still looked troubled. What's going on? John arrived in his swimming trunks, with his hair drenched and water droplets dripping down his body. He just finished a quick morning swim. Alice is worried something might happen to Adam. Sarah said with a chuckle. I am sure everything is fine. We are living in one of the most safe towns in the country. John said with a reassuring smile. Alice nodded thoughtfully. There hadn't been any big crimes in Navy Town. There hadn't been a single murder in the past 3 years. There had been occasional robberies, but nothing major. Alice's shoulders slightly relaxed on hearing this. At that moment, a couple of young men walked by them on the beach. They were both well-toned, with tan skin, and quite charming. They saw the beautiful Alice and smiled at her before continuing on their way. Any ordinary young woman would have felt flattered by the attention. Alice simply rolled her eyes and covered herself with her towel. Alice, take your mind off him and go make friends. Sarah said. You're here to relax and enjoy yourself, not to pine over some guy who clearly isn't worth your time. Humph. Alice pouted. Mom, you're always too harsh on him. Rightfully so. Sarah shouted. He is good for nothing and he'll just end up doing nothing for the rest of his life. He is doing well, though, didn't he become mercenary? Alice said. I heard that the test to become one is incredibly difficult. So what? Sarah shook her head. He'll just waste a few years there, die, and lose everything. Then he'll return to my shop to work for another few years before he just moves off town to do some other odd jobs. You have no faith in him. Alice said with a sigh. Also, he paid for this trip, so you could at least pretend to say nice things about him. I am doing this for you. Sarah said and slammed the book shut. I know you two are close, but remember that you two cannot become any closer. I forbid it. We aren't even blood-related siblings. Alice mumbled. I have heard of some couples that met through the government-appointed caretaker system and are living happily. I pretend I didn't hear any of that. Sarah said sternly. Drop the thought immediately. If we had met naturally through school, it would have been a completely different story. Alice said. You would have happily accepted the relationship. But now you don't because you are treating Adam as a son, aren't you? Ha! Sarah's cheeks turned red for a moment. My son? Blah, what nonsense. He is a leech, that's what he is. Dad, say something. Alice turned to John with her round eyes sparkling with innocence. That's girl talk, I am taking a nap. John laid down on his own beach chair and started snoring almost instantly. Alice pouted in frustration and laid back down on the towel. She closed her eyes and tried to relax, but her mind was still buzzing with questions about Adam and relationships. Here's the entrance. Adam opened the door to his wardrobe. I wanted to act as an elevator going to the secret hideout. Kong wrote something on his clipboard and looked around the room. The House of Kind Fourths was bustling with activity as several dozen workers began their assigned tasks. The house on the outside was covered by a large green tent that made it so that no outsider could see inside. The neighbors peeked from their windows, wondering what in the world was happening in the Kind Fourth residence. I got it all. Kong wrote it down with a nod. We'll be done in 3 to 4 days. I'll be in the new world for that duration. Adam said and looked at his virtual pod. Don't move it, or you'll fry my brain. I'll be extra careful. Kong replied. See you in 3 days, then. Adam climbed inside his virtual reality pod and pressed a button. The lid of the pod swiftly closed, sealing him inside, and his consciousness slowly drifted away. Kong and the rest started working tirelessly on the house. Adam opened his eyes and saw that he was back in his living quarters in the Crimson Hound's residence. A chilly wind wafted through the slightly open window, carrying the scent of pine and grass. Adam sat on the edge of the bed, rubbed his eyes, and then tried to flow his mana through his body. It worked flawlessly. I guess it is time to start learning my new skills. I'll start with pull and push as they should be easy enough to learn in a couple of days. Shield charge shouldn't be too hard, but ground king might be impossible for me at this point. I simply lack the physical prowess. I need either a higher level or just to increase my muscle mass, both take lots of time to do. Adam went to his desk, took a round object from the drawer, and placed it on top of the desk. It was shaped like a ball and had a smooth, shiny surface. He left the ball there, and took a seat on his bed. Then, as he moved his legs to a cross-legging position, he extended his hand forward towards the ball that was around 5 meters away from him. Whew! Adam took a deep breath and tried to imagine the ball rolling towards him without him having to move. He was trying to learn pull. Progress, 1%. 2%. 3%. Chapter 106, Gathering. Somewhere in the blind sea, an island, shrouded by the fog of the morning, appeared like a ghostly mirage on the horizon. The calm waves gently lapped at the shore, creating an eerie yet peaceful atmosphere. At the same moment, a fleet of ships cut through the waves and headed straight to the island, their white sails billowing in the air. At the head of the ship, a man dressed like a pirate, with a cutlass dangling from his hip and a black eye patch over his right eye, looked over to the island. Stop right here! Amor shouted to his crew and then headed to the starboard railing to get a better look at the surrounding ships. He saw other ships stopping as well. They took small boats instead, with a group of 10 men in each boat. Captain Amor, is this really the place? A crewmate of his walked over to him and asked while looking at the island with a deep look. This was a legendary location, after all. Use your Kiryoku and search for your feelings. Amor said. You can feel it, can't you? His crewmate closed his eyes, inhaled with only his nose, and then slowly opened his eyes. I can feel it. This is definitely the place for the gathering. It is my first time participating in it, but I can now see why this event is legendary. Yeah, gathering. Amor paused for a moment to take a deep breath. It is finally starting again. Dawn Watch, Crimson Hound. In the office, Digby looked at the letter on the desk and clearly looked troubled. He touched his forehead and rubbed his thumb and forefinger together, deep in thought. The window was barely open, letting in a slight breeze that carried the scent of fresh grass. The winter winds were long gone, and so were the fallen leaves that once covered the ground. It was also time for an event that always took the world of mercenaries by storm. It was one of the most anticipated events of the year. Troublesome. Digby put his back against his chair's backrest and squeezed the armrest. What to do? While deep in thought, the door opened, and Valera came in dressed in her armor maiden attire. The chest plate outlined her feminine physique, molded perfectly to fit her. It was lightweight yet sturdy, and it was polished into a mirror-like shine. Its edges were crimson in color, like their guild's color, and there was an emblem of a crimson-furred dog. Alongside that, she wore a crimson-colored skirt that matched the same colors perfectly. Her hair was tied back in a braid, and she was humming a pleasant melody. You're in a good mood, Digby said and asked. What's going on? Good weather, you should go out sometime, Valera said with a smile. I came here to talk about that summer training camp. Is it still happening? It is, but I don't have time to worry about that for now. Digby showed her the letter and gave it to her. Trouble has arrived. Valera opened the letter and read through it quickly, her smile fading as she reached the last sentence. That's. We knew the gathering was going to happen soon, and I was fine with it as our guild was going to participate, but they also wanted him to be there. This is unprecedented. Not really. Digby shook his head. It's happened before in the past. Whenever a new S-ranker came to be, they were also invited to the gathering. This is not an invite, Valera said. This is order. That's right, Digby said with a sigh. Other S-rankers joined powerful guilds that allowed them the freedom of just refusing the invitation, but we don't have that luxury. What do they want with Adam? Valera asked. 7 ancient guilds are in charge of the gathering. Are they planning to get Adam to join them? That shouldn't be allowed. I don't know. Digby scratched his head. This letter does not say who was the one who gave the order. However, it has an emblem of Imperium City, so it must be someone from there. What should we do? Valera asked. Beyonder and those below aren't allowed to join the gathering. Should we use the rule to reject the order? We aren't in a position to make enemies out of any of them, Digby said and frowned. I'll talk to my father. There's no other way. Has Adam returned from his short vacation? Valera asked. Yes, I sensed his return 3 days ago, Digby said. However, he has been mostly keeping to himself since he got back. What is he doing? Learning new skills, or so I assume, he said. I can sense his concentration. Should we mention to him about the gathering? Not yet, I'll talk to my father first. He should know who gave this order. The light of the sun filtered through the small gaps between curtains and stretched across the room in a warm embrace. The sunlight soon reached the bed, where Adam was deep in concentration. Adam extended his hand forth, and it was like he grasped at invisible threads. Pull! He softly whispered. The small ball on top of the desk slowly started to levitate and slowly headed in his direction. It soon landed on top of Adam's outstretched hand. He then grabbed it tight and pointed the ball towards the desk. His eyelids twitched slightly and then he closed his eyes and focused his mana on his fingertips, and that way, into the ball. Push. Progress, 99%. Ding, ding. Progress, 100%. The ball flew off his hand and slowly flew the distance of 5 meters before dropping onto the desk. It bounced a couple of times before rolling off the edge onto the floor. Adam opened his eyes with sweat filling his forehead and an exhausted smile on his face. It took him 3 days to learn both skills. It was quite fast pace. Finally, Adam laid down on the bed with his back drenched in sweat. He closed his eyes, planning to take a quick nap as he didn't really sleep last night as he wanted to learn the skills before Kong and others finished up with the house. However, at that moment, he heard a ding in his ear as he received a message to his virtual pod. He lazily checked it out, and it came from Kong. His message said that the house was done. That's quick. Adam opened his interface and pressed the logout button. From his toes to the knee, his avatar started slowly vanishing into floating pixels that disappeared into the digital void. Within seconds, his flesh, bones, blood, and everything else turned a light blue and some into white pixels. They eventually fell to the floor, went straight through, and vanished from sight. Adam's eyes fluttered open as he saw the glass lid stretched over his vision. With a lazy wave of his hand, he tapped on the button that opened the lid. The glass lid slid open with a soft hiss. He slowly climbed out of the virtual pod, and not even a second later, the door opened and Kong came in. Good morning. Morning. Adam nodded. So it is done. One thing remains. Kong turned his gaze to the virtual pod. You want to change its location to the secret hideout? Yeah, that would be preferable. Adam said with a nod. Snap. Kong snapped his fingers, and a couple of his workers entered the room. They started carrying the virtual pod and went to the ordinary-looking wardrobe. Kong pressed a hidden lever, and that opened the back wall of the wardrobe, showing an elevator inside the wardrobe. It looked like something from a spy movie. They entered the hidden elevator with the virtual pod and pressed a button that took them straight down. You have 1 year to pay for the whole thing. You know what happens if you don't, right? Kong said to make sure. I know, it won't be a problem. Adam said and shook his hand. Thanks for the hard work. No problem. Do you need me to go through with every function with you? No. I know everything. Adam said. NN. Kong nodded, curious about how, but didn't push it further. After the 2 workers returned to the room, Kong bade farewell to Adam, and then they left the house with the other dozen workers. They took away the green tent that had been covering the house for the past 3 days and then left with several trucks. And just like that, the house looked completely the same before they even came. However, Adam knew just how different it actually was. Chapter 107, Hera. Adam stepped into the hidden elevator, hidden in the wall behind the wardrobe. After entering the elevator, which had walls of white, the door closed with a soft click. On the control panel, there were only 2 options, floor 0 and 2. He pressed on the 0, and the elevator descended slowly without making any noise. It was so silent that he could hear his own heartbeat. A few seconds later, the elevator reached its destination, and the door softly hissed open. Adam stepped out of the elevator and looked around the newly created underground room that looked like a futuristic laboratory. Its walls and floors were white in color with blue linings, and the ceiling was adorned with bright fluorescent lights that bathed the room in a soft, eerie glow. This room alone was bigger than the entire house above the ground. While the floor's name was 0, this secret hideout was actually around 10 meters below ground level. His virtual pod was right at the center of this room, its cables stretching out like spider legs in all directions. At the end of the room, there were a wall of monitors that were connected to hidden cameras situated all around the house. There were even some around the neighborhood. Adam touched the white chair that was positioned near the monitors and felt its soft cushions that felt like marshmallows. Nice. He thought out loud and then sat down on the chair. There was a long keyboard on the desk. He reached for it and pressed a simple start button. The monitors flickered for a moment, and then a strange humming sound reverberated from the wall. Hello. A strange voice came from the ceiling's intercom. It was a robotic voice with not a single hint of emotion. It was the machine that controlled the house. It was also in control of all the weapon systems. Hello, what's your name? Adam asked. I don't have one. Do you want one? Your wish is my wish. Very well. Adam said, thought about the name, and then said. Fine, your name is Hira. Hira is a name of female origin. Do you wish for me to change my voice to match my new name? Sure, do that, Adam said. Done. The voice said. This time, it was quite different. It had some robotic tones to it, but it still had a soft, feminine sound to the voice. Anything else you want from me? I want 3 individuals to be considered friends. Adam said. Alice, John, and Sarah. Alice, John, and Sarah Kindforth are now considered friends. Keep an eye around the neighborhood. If you see someone suspicious, take a picture and then show it to me once I am available. I will do so. Maybe I'll recognize a few faces. Adam thought, and then he checked out the monitors. It was quite quiet in the neighborhood. Only a few cars passed by, and nobody seemed out of place. Hira, how much am I in debt? $298,456 to the Saruza gang. I guess I'll need to start making money. Adam shook his head, but he wasn't feeling too hurried. You are connected to my phone as well, aren't you? Correct. Do I have any missing calls or messages? You have 12 missing calls from Alice Kindforth. 12? Adam frowned. Did something happen? Call her. Ding, ding. A ringing sound reverberated throughout the house. At last, a soft click sounded as someone answered. Alice, is something wrong? Adam spoke to the empty air. It still sounded very clear in the other line. Oh, Adam. Alice's chirpy voice came from the ceiling's intercom. Were you busy? Not currently, did something happen? Adam asked. Not really, just wanted to ask how things are going there. It's fine. Adam said and looked around the secret hideout. Very fine. You guys are coming back in a couple of days, right? Yup, you should have also come. Dad and Mom are over the moon because of this place. I feel like they don't want to ever leave. Yeah, I know the feeling. Adam sighed and smiled. Take care, I gotta go now. Take care. The phone call was disconnected. Hira, do a special bronze virtual reality pod order with a very hazy glass lid, Adam said. Done. The expected delivery time is 18 hours. After speaking with her, I remembered something. She will most likely come to my room to check on how I am doing, and if she doesn't see me or the virtual pod, she will wonder where the hell I am. With the virtual reality pod there and the hazy glass lid that won't show anything inside, she will just assume I am playing. Once the delivery man arrives, take care of the order for me. I'll tell him to take it to your room. Good. Consider the delivery man friendly, but the moment he leaves, make sure to double check everything and lock up. Also, remove his friendly status. Should I do a quick background check on him before letting him in? Sure. Adam stood up and went to the VR pod, then, with a simple press of a button, the glass lid slid open, and he climbed inside. Then, with another press of a button, the glass lid closed, and his consciousness traveled to a completely different world. Here it turned quiet, but the machine continued humming. Its full attention was now on the cameras, ensuring that no one suspicious gets anywhere close to this house. Somewhere in the real world. MMH. A grey-haired man stabbed his fork through a piece of steak, then cut it into tiny pieces with the knife before taking a bite and savoring the flavor. The steak's rich flavors assaulted his taste buds. The dining hall was quiet and empty. Its long table had seats for nearly 50 guests, but there he was, sitting alone, enjoying the steak as well. It was a good comparison to the gloomy weather that had been lingering outside. Slam! The dining hall's double doors banged open, and a well-dressed man entered the hall. He stopped at the other end of the table, a distance of about 20 meters between them, and put his hand on the chair's backrest, looking across the room with a piercing gaze. "You have something to say?" the grey-haired man said. "Spit it out, Digby." "Father." Digby paused and took a deep breath before speaking. "You know about the letter I received? About the gathering?" Samuel took another bite off the steak. "I know you received one. All Tier 1 and 2 guilds got it." "I received an order," Digby said. "It said to bring Adam there." "What the hell is the meaning of this?" "Oh, your little S-ranker." Samuel chuckled and drank a little bit of the red wine. "I suppose the ancient guilds want to meet him." "I don't think the order came from them," Digby said. "The letter didn't have a name. Only a signed emblem of Imperial City." "Oh." Samuel paused and asked. "Do you have a picture of the letter?" Digby brought out his phone and slid his phone across the entire table. The phone's momentum slowly vanished and stopped right beside the plate of steak. Samuel took the phone and checked out the letter. It didn't take him long to read it, but then he read it a second time and even a third time. He continued reading it for 5 whole minutes. Digby waited patiently. At last, after the 5th minute, Samuel put the phone down and looked startled. It was a rare show of surprise from him. "What is it?" Digby asked with a frown. "You know something, tell me, father." "I know who gave the order," Samuel said, and didn't feel like eating any more. "You don't have any power to refuse the order, and neither should you. Take the S-ranker to that island. I don't think they'll harm him." "Who was it?" Digby asked. "Please, who?" Samuel took a deep breath before responding. "King Moriarty." Chapter 108, Sparring Match. Adam woke up in his living quarters at the Crimson Hound's base. It took him a short moment to get his scattered thoughts settled. He moved his head slightly to the left, then slowly sat up and rubbed his eyes. As he stood up to leave the living quarters to go straight to the training courtyard, as he had skipped quite many lessons now, he noticed the black ball on the floor. Adam reached out his hand towards the black ball and said the magical words. "Pull." The black ball slowly rose into the air as if it were hanging from a thread. It slowly started to wiggle towards Adam, slowly weaving through the air. It then landed on Adam's hand. He opened the drawer, put the black ball inside, and closed the drawer with a satisfying click. Adam then checked out his timepiece and realized that the lesson must be ongoing. Dressed in his casual training outfit made of breathable fabric, he left his living quarters and, outside, saw others facing each other in the center courtyard, dueling with wooden swords and shields. "Oh, you've returned," Dutch said as he approached him. "Here." He tossed Adam a wooden shield and sword. "Let's see if you have improved any." "Who is my opponent?" Adam asked as he stepped onto the courtyard. "Alan," Dutch shouted towards the orange-haired young man standing at the other end of the courtyard. He was talking to a short-haired brunette. They seemed intimate. She was his girlfriend, the one who died on the 10th floor. After a few days, the ones who died returned to Dawn Watch. It was very disheartening for most of them to lose nearly a year's worth of hard work, but none of them outright quit. "Yes, teacher." Alan walked over to them with a shield in one hand and a sword in the other. "Have a sparring match with young Adam," Dutch said. "The first to land 3 hits on the opponent is the victor." Alan looked at Adam and nodded briefly. For the past month, Adam was quite outsider to them, as he mostly spent his time practicing with Digby or alone, so they didn't have a lot of time to talk with each other. However, during the raid, Adam became properly part of their raid squad. They all valued his tanking skills, and honestly, most of them were relieved to have a proper tank in their raid party who could protect their backs. Their previous tank was mediocre, at best. "I am not going to hold back," Alan said and moved to his attacking stance. With the shield in front and the sword at the ready, it was Crimson Hound's attacking form that focused on counter-attacks. "Good." Adam lowered his own shield to the side and put the sword in attacking form. Dutch put his whistle between his lips and blew a sharp note to signal the start of the sparring match. Alan didn't move an inch. Adam, on the other hand, took a quick stride forward and thrust his wooden sword forward. The sword grazed at Alan's shield, and then Alan swiftly swung his shield up, pushing the sword out of the way. Without a moment of hesitation, Alan took a stride forward and stabbed his own sword forward. This was the counter-attack he was waiting for. Adam placed the shield in front of the sword's tip and stopped the blow right in its tracks. The wooden blade's tip was the only part of the sword that was touching the shield. Alan's momentum was quickly halted. A perfect defense, Dutch thought with shaky eyes. Adam managed to completely nullify the power behind Alan's strike by focusing his defense on the tip of the blade. Adam swung his sword from over his shoulder and hacked it down like a whip. Alan quickly blocked it with his shield, but he staggered a few steps back from the force of the blow, his eyes widening in surprise. Adam pressed forward and lunged his sword forward, using the entirety of his arm's length to drive the blade towards Alan's chest. Alan realized he couldn't block it in time and took a step backward instead, but the tip of the blade barely scratched his chest. "Whistle." Dutch blew on the whistle. "First point, Adam." "Damn." Alan softly cursed under his breath and moved back to his fighting stance. "You can do it, Alan," the short-haired girl shouted from the sidelines. It made Alan's cheeks blush, but it also made his heart race. He had even more pressure on this fight now, as he didn't want to embarrass himself. Nah sat on a bench after a long sparring session and looked over to the two sparring match. Alan is very talented in swordsmanship, but he is still losing. He took a long gulp from the water canteen and then closed it. Nahs was quite surprised, but after remembering the events of the 10th floor, it started to make quite a bit of sense. Adam is vastly better with the shield. It is like he has been training with it his whole life. Whistle. Dutch blew on the whistle again. Adam was the first one to make the move again. He lunged forward as if he wasn't one bit scared of being hit by the opponent's sword. Alan's focus was on his sword, wondering from which direction the attack would come. However, as soon as Adam's foot landed back on the ground after the lunge, he placed his shield in front of him and rammed straight through Alan's block. Ack! Alan flew backwards for a short moment and then fell down to the grainy ground with a soft thump. And instantly after, Adam's wooden sword touched his neck. Ah! Alan looked past the sword and straight at Adam's face. Adam looked calm and collected, a few pants escaping his lips. Whistle. Second point, Adam. Dutch shouted and then thought. How come it is so one-sided? Are their skill gaps just so big? Adam backed off a couple of steps and moved back to his leisure stance, his shield on the side and sword at the front. Alan groaned, then kicked his legs up before flipping himself back to his feet. I am so careless. I was so focused on the sword. Alan thought with a frustrated sigh. He was frustrated at himself for making such a silly mistake. On the sidelines, Nahs shook his head. You didn't fail because of the mistake. Adam saw where your focus was and used that to his advantage. You simply walked into his trap. Dutch put the whistle between his lips and was about to blow into it, but then rapid footsteps came from the direction of the hallways. A guard, dressed in crimson armor, came to the courtyard and bowed to Dutch before locking his gaze with Adam. Adam, you've been summoned by the guild master. It is urgent. What's going on? Adam frowned and lowered his sword. Dutch nodded with a serious gaze and took the weapons from Adam's hands. You should go. Do not let the guild master wait for you. Adam nodded firmly and followed after the guard as they left the center courtyard. What's going on? Nahas came to ask. It sounded serious. I am not sure. Dutch said, but then looked at his students, who had stopped training. What are you idling about? Go back to training. Why yes, sir. Nahas walked over to Alan and put his hand over his shoulder. Do not fret about your loss. I didn't lose yet. Alan shouted with a scoff. I'll continue his fight once he returns from the Guildmaster's chambers. Sure, Nahas laughed. By the way, do you want to know Adam's weakness? Weakness? Alan frowned. He has one. Everyone does. Nahas said. Alan thought for a moment before shaking his head. I don't need help. I'll defeat him alone. Nahas chuckled, knowing that Alan would refuse. Very well. Chapter 109, Truth about the Gathering. The guard's metallic footsteps echoed through the empty corridors. Adam followed after him with his ears perked up, listening to the echo of those footsteps. Not a single word was uttered between them. At last, the guard arrived at the guildmaster's chambers and knocked on the door. Come in. A deep voice came from the inside. The guard nodded, then stepped aside, turned around, and stood as a guard beside the door. You may enter. Adam buttoned up his shirt, then yanked the door open and entered the chamber. This was his first time being here. The meeting with Digby was usually in his offices, but now it was in his private chambers. Without hesitation, he was hit by waves of powerful auras that seemed to pulse throughout his body. Adam's eyes widened open. In the office, nearly 10 figures were standing around a large conference table, all staring directly at him. Adam, there's something we need to discuss. Digby said from the end of the table. These are. Adam looked over the people around the table. Crimson Hound's strongest members. What's going on? So, this is the famous S-Ranker. A motherly figure said with a giggle. We've heard so much about you. She had a warm smile on her face and long, chocolate-colored hair that cascaded down her lower back like a waterfall. She was quite beautiful and gave off very motherly vibes. I expected him to be taller. Zahn, a black-eyed man, said with a joking tone. Didn't the rumors say that he is nearing 3 meters, is built like a brick house, and has a voice that could shake the earth? Lucette, the motherly-looking woman, raised an eyebrow and laughed. Those rumors about S-Rankers are getting wilder each year, aren't they? You have time to introduce yourselves at a later date. Digby said. We have gathered you all here for the announcement. Valera stood beside him with a serious expression on her face. It must be that, right? Moriel asked, trying to suppress a smile. Moriel was a bald-headed man with a ruffled beard and a one-handed axe on his back. It made Adam remember a certain someone after catching a look at him. The gathering, Valera said. The others gasped in the cold air. It was a very important event, after all. It was also quite dangerous. The gathering. Adam's eyes shook. How could I've forgotten? It is happening around this time of the year. But why am I here? I shouldn't be allowed to attend this year. If I may ask, why is the S-Ranker here? Zahn asked. S-Ranker or not, he is still mercenaryman. Does he need to know about the gathering yet since he can't even attend? Digby sighed and said, Adam will be joining us. What? Others exclaimed in shock. They weren't sure whether that was allowed, and even if it was very reckless and almost idiotic. After all, the gathering wasn't a joke, and even they could die if they weren't careful. Why? Adam thought to himself with wide eyes. What are they thinking? That's very reckless. The future of this guild lies with Adam, this is not the time to be careless. Lucette said it with worry. It was not my choice. Digby shouted loud enough to silence the room. It is an order that came from higher than me. It is not an order that can be refused. 7 ancient guilds. A few guessed. They shouldn't have the power to do this. That's such bullshit. Tell your father. Valera lowered her head and rubbed her forehead. I already did. Digby said. The order came from a higher place than the Council of Mercenaries. Even higher. Zahn frowned. Elders of the Imperial Palace? No, they shouldn't be higher than the Council. It came from King Moriarty himself. Digby revealed a shocking truth. From the king. But why? King Moriarty is coming to the gathering. Adam tapped his feet against the carpeted floor, thoughts running around his mind like a whirlwind. This was shocking news to him. I haven't met King Moriarty ever. Not even in my previous life. Why would he want me there? All right, calm down. Digby said calmly. I am not thrilled about this order either, but now you can see why we cannot refuse. Adam must come with us. Lucette looked at Adam and asked, Young Adam, do you know anything about the gathering? No, that's the first time I've heard about that. Adam replied with a quickly cooked lie. Let me explain it to you. Digby said and tapped on the conference table. A holographic image of a fog-shrouded island with waves crashing against craggy cliffs suddenly appeared out of nowhere. This was a holographic map. This is Kuro Island, Digby said. The location of the gathering. It's in the Blind Sea, and the only way to get there is from Driftwood. Our ship is already waiting for us at the docks. It's a 3-day trip, but we should arrive in time for the gathering. The gathering is a special day of the year. During that day, thousands of special breeds of chaos beings will respawn on that island. That's why hundreds of the guilds go there to kill them and make sure they aren't leaving the island. If we leave them unattended, they can swim to the mainland and cause enormous damage in the new world. It's something we cannot let happen. During the years, that day became sort of a festival of some sort as the strongest mercenaries of different factions and guilds gathered in the same place. If you're lucky, you may even witness a duel between the most renowned fighters in the realm. Sometimes, during the gathering, there are friendly sparring matches, but sometimes there are not so friendly fights, and entire guilds might get destroyed overnight. That's why it is far from safe. Also, do not underestimate those chaos beings. There's something strange about them. I understand. Adam nodded, but his fingers were curled into tight fists. Calamity will be there. Saphira will be there. Also, there has always been one goal during the gathering. Digby said. To destroy the respawn crystal that causes their yearly respawning. It is rare for them to be on an island so close to the mainland where chaos beings can just respawn, even if it is only once a year. I see. Adam nodded, but then his lips curled into a slight smirk. I forgot about that, yet. Back in the previous life, was it in the year 2155? No, year 2156. The respawn crystal was discovered and destroyed. It was discovered by Calamity. Not in this life, you fucker. Adam inhaled a sharp breath and calmed his racing thoughts. It's going to be dangerous to try to find the respawn crystal, even though I know where it is. It's also pretty worthless to find because, a year after the destruction of the crystal, they still respawned. So there might be more than one respawn crystal there, but as long as I steal this find from Calamity, I can steal some of his future. That discovery spiraled Calamity to a higher level of fame, and his name was on the tongue of everyone for a long while, which allowed him to gain power and status within the new world. "We'll be departing tomorrow for Driftwood," Digby said. "After this meeting is over, Adam, meet me at the vault. I can't let you go there unprepared." Adam's eyes widened in a pleasant surprise, and he nodded. "Yes, Guildmaster." Chapter 110, Political Games. The darkness fell over the city of Dawnwatch as soon as the night arrived. The building lights flickered on, casting a warm glow onto the streets below, where a few pedestrians were still returning from their work or heading out for a night of revelry. Currently, in the silent residence of Crimson Hounds, few guards did their rounds around the perimeter. At the sleeping quarters, Adam was sitting on his bed, one knee up and the other dangling off the edge. He was looking at the items scattered on the floor and contemplating the meeting that happened a few hours ago. After the meeting, he and Digby visited the Crimson Hound's vault, and from there, Adam grabbed a few items for himself for the duration of the gathering. It included the familiar crimson armor, a protective amulet, and a strange whistle. They were all protective items that the Crimson Hounds had acquired during their years in the dungeon. Digby didn't give him a single offensive skill, as he didn't want him to fight anyone, as that would only bring him immature death. The protective amulet. Adam took it for himself and thought, an artifact that can protect me from one lethal hit. He then looked at the whistle. A whistle that can only be heard by a specific group of people. In this case, every Crimson Hound member would be able to hear it, and if I used it, they would know I was in danger. Digby, with his Kiryoku, would be able to find my location with ease. He took the items into his inventory. Adam then noticed that he still had some worthless items in his inventory, which was weighing him down. Right, I should sell those. He laid down on the bed, deciding to do it tomorrow before the departure towards Driftwood. As he was about to close his eyes to catch some sleep, he heard a faint noise coming from the hallway. His eyes twitched open, and then the footsteps stopped right in front of his door. A second later, a knock sounded. Adam slowly stood up and walked over to the door. He hesitatingly opened the door to find a group of 3 familiar faces standing there. "Hello." Nahs, Hannah, and Alan stood outside in their casual attire, as they had already hung their armor for the night. "What's up?" Adam asked and looked around the outside, only to see no one else but them. "May we enter?" Nahs asked and annoyingly looked towards the night sky. "While the winter winds have gone by, nights are still quite cold here outside. I was just about to go to sleep," Adam said and scratched the back of his head. "Is this important?" "We were curious about your meeting with the guild master," Hannah said. "Apparently the core members of the guild were there as well, is that right?" "Is this about the gathering?" Alan asked. "It is supposed to happen soon, right?" Come in, I guess." Adam motioned them inside and sat down on his bed with his back against the wall. He then took his pillow and placed it between his back and the wall for some cushion. Nahs closed the door while Hannah and Alan entered first. They looked around the humble-looking room and saw that Adam hadn't done a single decoration of his own. They, on the other hand, had already made their quarters look like theirs with personal touches and vibrant colors. Nahs took a chair and sat down the wrong way with the backrest facing him instead. "Well, can you tell us about the meeting?" Alan curiously asked. "It was about the gathering," Adam said. "We are leaving tomorrow." "We?" Hannah asked with a puzzled expression. "What do you mean by that?" "I am going with the rest of the core," Adam said. Alan and Hannah looked surprised and somewhat worried. That wasn't just some ordinary camping trip. It was a dangerous trip to the land of darkness. "Is it because you are an S-ranker?" Nahs asked with a frown. "However, this is very reckless from Digby. Is he wanting you to get experience?" "It wasn't Digby's choice," Adam said with a sigh. "I was ordered to go there." "Ordered?" Hannah asked in confusion. Nahs frowned. Unfortunately, it looks like you can't escape the political games of the Imperium folk. Oh, you seem to know something. Adam looked at him with a chuckle. The tension has been high in the Imperium city lately. Nah said. It's like a war is about to burst out at any moment. Back in my previous life, I did my tutorial 3 years later than now, and I heard a great deal about the unrest during this period. However, there weren't any big wars. However, that tension slowly built up over the years and finally exploded in 2155, when the Great Guild War finally began between the 7 ancient guilds. 7 factions fighting for supremacy. Every guild had to choose their side in the war, leading to a year of war and chaos. 3 of the 7 ancient guilds got destroyed in the war, and everyone on their side was also promptly eliminated. I was only a 2-year-old mercenary when the war began. I was just a foot soldier for the Dying Star faction, and it was the most dangerous time of my life. When the Second Guild War started between Star faction and Death faction, I was already strong enough to become general. Who ordered you to go there? Hannah quickly asked. Before Adam could respond, Nas interjected and said, "It doesn't matter. We don't have to know. It's an order that cannot be refused, I assume." But Hannah pouted. "I wanna know. Digby's father is Samuel Chaucer, an elder in the Imperium Palace." Nas said. "Digby definitely went to him to nullify the order, but if even he can't do it, no one else can. The order must come from very high up, then." Alan said, and his eyes slowly widened as if he had realized something. "Alan, keep it to yourself." Nas stood up and said, "Adam, have a good rest. The trip will be long." "Alan, what is it?" Hannah begged for him to say something, but Alan kept his mouth shut with a wry smile. After bidding farewell, they dragged Hannah away while she continued to pester them. The political games. Adam shook his head. The 7 ancient guilds fought against each other to begin with to have a shot to reach the top. The winner of the war would have taken control of the rest of the guilds, and with such power in the winner's hand, they would have been able to contest King Moriarty for the seat of the king. However, King Moriarty and his guild, the Imperial Order, joined the war and ended it in a single day. Since the winner of the war was never decided, no one had a chance to challenge him for the throne. In the war, S-rankers were the tip of the spear of their respected factions, and I guess that's why King Moriarty wants me to go to the gathering to have a chance to talk to me so I don't join any factions. A single S-ranker can shift the balance of factions drastically because of their immense talent. Currently, Mauricio and Calamity are on Nightshade faction, led by Ambrose Hawthorne. Saphira and Arxam are on the Dying Star faction, led by Orion. The remaining 5 factions don't have any S-rankers on their ranks, but they are incredibly strong, with hundreds of A-rankers. If I join the Dying Star faction, like I did in my previous life, their strength and influence would reach the top of the factions. It would put them in a very strong position. King Moriarty most likely doesn't want that. Perhaps he had already seen the future of my joining the Dying Star faction. I cannot underestimate his power and cunningness." Adam cracked his knuckles, deep in thought. King Moriarty. It's hard to know what he's thinking.